actually just opening something and looking at it a second time, following a particular trail forward of discovery around that item. All of those are actually rich signals that as a human we would watch and derive some conclusion and make up a story in our head about who that person is. We just need, again, the application to do that as well.
Welcome to the Evolve Voices podcast, a platform to hear the fascinating stories behind the people that power global commerce. I'm Edilsa, a brand advisor, and your US host of Evolve Voices. Today's story is on the ground at Shop Talk Fall in Chicago, and it's of being seen. Agentic AI expert Paul Meinshausen builds technology that doesn't just work, it understands people, like really understands them. He's helped the US Department of Defense make sense of massive data, led data science teams in consumer tech, and co-founded a fintech startup that was acquired for $185 million. He's the one I want on my trivia team. In this conversation, Paul takes us behind the curtain, what really happens at conferences, why investors can be your teammates, and how small, everyday cues, what people wear, when they engage, what they notice, reveal so much about the choices we make. Because in the end, technology isn't about scale for the sake of scale. It's about scaling understanding. Hey, Paul, I'm so glad to have you here. Your first Shop Talk.
First Shop Talk, yeah.
What are your impressions so far?
It's cool. Yeah, we had a great panel yesterday.
Yeah.
Very thoughtful conversation. I think very well moderated. I've been back to back in conversations this morning, so I'm excited to kind of like walk around and check it out and see a few of the sessions if I can make it. But so far, it's been great.
I always find myself as like you're a founder now. You were an operator before. What's your goal when you're in these conferences? Like, how do you tackle them?
I think most people I've interacted with seem to approach conferences as just an aperture in a very busy life that creates some space for learning and idea sharing and thoughtful conversations. That seems to be the main goal for most people I hear from.
Right.
And it reflects, my own, as well as an excitement about, helping them in that process and having interesting conversations. So that's the goal. Obviously, as a brand and a business that's growing pretty fast, we're also keen to just for people to see us in different kinds of contexts. Yeah. So they build up their own familiarity and get comfortable hearing the terms and the concepts. And there's a lot of education happening right now. That's
exactly.
Right?
That's
changing so many things that.
Because what I find with so many tools and new software around, especially with agentic AI, is the education gap. Do you use these forums to close that a little bit?
To close it, maybe not. I think that might be ambitious. In a sense, oftentimes it's almost open it because sometimes people don't know what they don't know. Right. A lot of times they don't know what they don't know, and the education needs to be to get on their radar that this is something they need to look into, right? Or to understand that there's a distinction here that they should click further into. Yeah. And then to the extent you can kind of dive deeper right away, that's great. A lot of people just need some time to process. So we see a lot of conversations happening over the next several months that emerge from the initial conversation that happens at the event.
So this plants the seed.
That's right.
Yeah, that's right. I love that, especially as you're coming into right now when brands are figuring out their 2026 plans.
That's right.
Which is crazy to think about. So planting the seeds right now when you're putting the operating plans really, really important. We'll talk about Aampe in a bigger way towards the end, but I want to hear more about you. I feel like what's so interesting is you're an operator by heart. You were deep in the weeds as a data scientist. And so for you, what made you take the leap into going, okay, I've known my specialty really, really well. Like, let me now build something.
In the moment, in the process of life, it's oftentimes big leaps are really just very small steps.
Right.
And being confident through the small steps. My first company, which I started in India in 2015.
India, oh my God.
I co-founded with two others, and our main driver was our CEO, who had a vision for a market gap, market opportunity, et cetera. And what I was very excited about and what I worked with was really enabling that technologically. So enabling us to solve the problem we wanted to solve. I didn't have a burning desire to build a business or start a company. But I did have a burning desire to advance the technology and make it possible to do certain things. And what I learned through that process, and what I've learned more generally over time, has been that oftentimes there's a context and there's a vehicle within which technology moves, and shaping that context and vehicle is really important. In SF, there's a lot of interest in things like sci-fi and stuff. There's this concept of the machine that builds the machine.
Yeah.
So you can build the machine, and you can build the machine that builds the machine. And ultimately, what's really exciting is you can build a lot more machines if you have a really good machine that can build machines. And that's what I think of as organizations. Bringing the right people together, helping kind of bring the right capital to bear, the right partners to bear, figuring out how to communicate it so that you can then see where it falls short and where it's overperforming, and then use that to then further calibrate the work.
Yeah.
So to me, being a founder, being an operator, very fluid.
Interesting.
And I like to think
that.
I like that I like to think that most people at Aampe can think of themselves as founders of Aampe, right?
Yeah.
In a substantial way. And I certainly still think of myself as an operator.
You do?
Absolutely, yeah.
How does that live and breathe in the day-to-day?
So, yeah, it's the operation might be in terms of having the right conversations with investors to sort of understand, do they have the clear vision of what we're doing and where we want to go? Are they going to be good strategic partners in terms of making key directional investments as we develop further technology, for example, or how we decide to brand ourselves in the market so that helps us create a category? Those to me are operational questions. They're different than a code commit where you're deciding to format a function in one way or another.
Right.
But ultimately,
but you're coding basically in different ways.
Yeah, that's right. You're coding an organization.
Yeah. I always, as you think of, now you talked about investors, that investor cap, like now that becomes a form of operating. Now you're looking for the right investors and finding them. For you, you talked about how the right investor helps you conserve energy. What does that mean to you?
So, to me, investors is a category of teammate, and your teammates, your employees, your colleagues are teammates, and your investors are really teammates too.
Yeah.
And both are trying to help advance a mission. And in fact, your customers are also your teammates, because you're choosing as much as anything who to speak to, who to try to convince, and then once they're on board, right, you're working with them to achieve their success. Their success is ultimately what drives your success.
Right.
And so it's just categories. I like to kind of reduce the overhead of thinking investor as a specialized, rarefied, kind of on another level thing who just sort of comes in and knows all and gives capital. And instead, it's a teammate, and we're interviewing them in terms of, are they the right folks to give capital? And energy is for me is the fundamental medium that determines everything we do. It's the thing that we operate through. In a sense, time is fixed. We can't do anything about it. An hour is an hour. But what you do with that hour is very variable. Everyone knows the experience of having a very productive hour where you feel like, wow, I knocked out 2 weeks of work, and an hour that just drags on.
Oh my God.
I'm doing nothing here. I'm staring at the screen.
Hopefully this hour isn't dragging
you might tell your boss or your partner or your colleague or your employee whatever you want, but in your head that you are not performing in that moment, right? And I'm a big believer that's get out, like go do something else, take a walk, find another form of energy. So what you're trying to do is conserve and then deploy your energy effectively, and we also gain energy from other people, right? Like we get it from them in the sense that they can bring us up or bring us down. They can add, signal, or they can add noise. And it's true for investors.
I love that.
As well.
The best thing I heard yesterday was like, even if somebody comes into you with that energy, take it, because it's an energy source, and just flip it around. It's never about, it's energy.
That's
at the end of the day, which I love that. And it makes you flip around a bad day. The reason I ask you about investors is I was a former investment banker way back in the day before I became a marketer by training. And in talking to some of my good old friends, they're always like, what I'm looking for right now, it's not technical knowledge. Technical knowledge, AI can replace. But I'm looking for go-to-market expertise and distribution and that. And so has it ever been turned against you, your technical knowledge of this space and your wherewithal? Or has it been a driving force as you think of scaling?
Tell me more what you mean by turned against.
So like somebody saying, well, you know the space really well. Yeah, you know AI, you know agentic, you know your data science background. But can you take this product to market?
I wouldn't say turned against that. I think what you just said is beautiful, right?
Yeah.
Like negative energy is just energy,
Yeah.
and it's like
Yeah.
to me that's a great insight in the sense of you're solving a complex problem. And as I mentioned before, technology is one element of it.
Right.
There's a lot more to it.
Right.
How do you interact? How do you communicate with people?
Right.
I think, so I spent with Aampe, my two original co-founders are both people with PhDs in neuroscience and spent their careers as software engineers and data scientists. And then we have our co-founder who's like an operational machine and brilliant. She's brilliant at that. She makes that business possible for us to run it in a sense that we have employees in 16 countries around the world, right? And we're in many different time zones, and we operate a pretty lean and very efficient, high energy machine. And then in terms of go to market, it's not what I know. There's a lot of just gaps.
Yeah.
To me, that's not a problem. That's a recognition. And so the operation just becomes, do you know enough to be able to identify that someone knows what they know?
Yeah.
Right. Mm-hmm. And can you give them a chance to run the experiment, to demonstrate it, and then enable them to be successful in that experiment? Because then that's what you want, right? Like, I think we don't need everything to be in my head. We need to be just a few things are in my head, and then the rest of it is about how the rest of the team operates and who's there, and including investors. What can they offer in terms of insight? So
the understanding piece, I love that, because it's so much as you go manage up is literacy and knowing where to have literacy and where you don't need to go in the weeds. Let the expert kind of take the drive. And it's where so many founders can go wrong as they try to be literate in too many areas. Where does your love for this space come from? I think of marketing, my first love for it came from my marketing professor. I was doing a laundry project, and I was supposed to assess market research. Could we revamp it on campus? And I was so obsessed with interviewing my friends about their issues with laundry, and I knew then that I would be doing marketing in my career. But where does it come from for you, like the obsession with technology and solving problems for people?
The through line for me has always been actually people.
Yeah.
It's been a person. It's been specifically cognition and how it works, psychology and how it works. We're operating as a unit, as a person. We operate in a pretty complex world.
Yeah.
Right. A lot of different factors. We can operate across niches. We're not like a lot of species which are very specialized in terms of their functions. We can live in the desert and we can live in the North Pole. We figure it out, right? We're going to try and live on Mars. The key thing is that flexibility introduces a lot of complexity. And what determines our success is how we're able to adapt ourselves, to learn, to make decisions. And we do that very extensively in social units as well, interacting with people. The same way I mentioned about us as the machine that builds the machine in terms of a group of people that can solve a task. Yeah. One of my favorite movies when I was little was The Right Stuff. And it was just this concept, right, of a group of people trying to solve a particular task. I did that environment, that context was always fascinating to me.
Yeah.
Teammates, right? Mm-hmm. And so the realization I think first hit me when I was in high school, and I didn't go to school, so I had a lot of time. to sort of pursue what I wanted.
Wait, what?
I didn't go to school until university.
You were homeschooled?
I was homeschooled.
Oh my God.
Yeah, that means a lot of things, but
that's amazing.
Yeah.
Okay.
So, but in high school, my older brother was much older than me. He was about 16 years older than me.
Yeah.
So my father was a tank developer in the Army, and he was a systems engineer. I grew up in Fort Knox, which is a home of armor where they developed. And so my brother was a systems engineer for Lockheed Martin, and they had a battlefield test lab at Fort Knox.
Yeah.
So I ended up spending a lot of time there for a couple of years interning, working on tank battle simulations. So they would just simulate an environment and then deploy a series of tanks, and then they would fight it out, and they would see how it worked, right? And this was the early 2000s. So there's a lot of technology development in terms of being able to estimate the line of sight of one tank to another. If you remember, it's like graphics were simple. Everything was simple in terms of the representation. But the thing that hit me was that we would be sitting there figuring it out, and right then is when the U.S. invaded Afghanistan. U.S. invaded Iraq, right? And so we would watch the news, and you just sort of see that tank battles had nothing to do with the kind of warfare and conflict that was being pursued, that was happening. Why a farmer in rural Afghanistan decides to take fertilizer, put it in a bucket and bury it under the road and blow it up, why somebody decides to join an insurgency has nothing to do with tanks. And so when I went to university, the idea of figuring out how to write better code to simulate tanks, when it seemed like the real problem was, how do we simulate minds and how do we understand ourselves? So that's where I deviated, and I went and studied anthropology instead, the cognitive side. But I always had a vein for the computational side of it, the modeling side of it. How can we represent a situation that a person is in a way that's scalable, that way that allows us to repeat it? It's sort of the scientific method applied to people. And then that kind of like that's been the through line in my profession. That's what always excited me. So when I left a PhD in cognitive science and quit and went into technology, a big part of it was because I thought that mobile phones, applications, consumer technology was a way for us to observe systematically and intervene and interact with humans in a way that would allow us to learn about ourselves. In a sense, consumer technology for me was the technology we needed to actually advance human science. Because otherwise we were stuck in the old days of just asking somebody to come into a lab and answer a bunch of questions. And that just wasn't sophisticated enough to understand humans.
You wanted to solve what you were seeing.
That's right. Exactly. So when so that has been what it's always been about for me, is how do we build applications that people will use because those applications actually add value. And the application can only add value if it is specific enough and contextual enough and is useful and usable for that person. And so the usage is the goal, but it's also the proof that you're doing something.
Yeah.
And a key part of adding value to someone is understanding them. That's what we do as humans. To add value to someone, you're listening to them. You're hearing them. You're understanding where they are, and then you're helping them. We do that as humans. But so far, our applications have this big lag where it's like you go as a human, you go talk to somebody, you try and figure out their problem, and then you go convert that into code. And you write the code and you say, this is the workflow. This is the process. Somebody wants to do this, and then they want to do this, and then they want to do this. But you're simplifying a lot of complexity, and you're representing this very simple model, and you're putting it into an application that is very static and rigid.
Yeah. Tell me.
And so that is, to me, marketing is just one manifestation of this. Right? The application itself, the product itself is part of it, but you want the infrastructure to have the capability to communicate and learn about someone the way we do as humans.
Is that what you find that Aampe is doing in this market?
Yes.
So talk to me a little bit more about the tool, because as I think of, for clients right now, that a lot of their marketing tech stack, and it gets super complicated, and they're just like, is this valuable? Is this useful?
Yeah.
Is this solving a problem? And what I find a lot is that I get into these pitches with vendors, and they're pitching the really exciting stuff that's not solving their problem. So talk to me about, that piece of Aampe, like what Aampe does and what solution, what problem are you solving?
Well, can you give me an example of like what would be complex and exciting but not solving a problem?
AI agents trying to solve styling. They want to pitch, well, like, isn't this cool that like I can just show you at the event with the dress? But then I'm like, but that's not their problem. Their problem is fit. And what they're asking you is, can you tell me, will this fit my body type?
Right. Okay. So the way I think about it is we can zoom into a very particular and specific problem.
Yeah.
And we can zoom out and ask, what is a more general version of that problem? Okay. The specific problem might be, does this fit me? And I would say, sometimes that comes down to a technological capability of, can you project a person's image into a particular item and realistically enough portray that to allow them to evaluate fit. And I would say then that becomes, you can then redirect the vendor and say, I'm not interested in that part, I'm interested in this part.
Yeah.
I would also say though that oftentimes that particular problem is embedded in a broader context problem, a continuous context problem, which is, you want to know something will fit you and why. Why did you want to know if that thing would fit you as opposed to any n number of other things? And then also, what does it represent about you in the world? And what are you going to get if it does fit you? What else might you get over time, right? Mm-hmm. And how did you arrive at that thing? If you think about like fashion, I think fashion is not like, is it a black dress? Will it make you feel professional or sleek or sexy, right? And that depends on the context. You don't want to feel sexy necessarily in a particular kind of professional environment. You want to feel sexy maybe on a date, right? In the right context, right? So there's a broader context of how you arrive at that. And then what makes you feel sexy or what makes you feel professional depends on, like, are you from Texas or are you from New York, right? And what is your background? And all these aspects of how you express yourself. And so I think the broader process is trying to help someone do that more efficiently in a world which is drowned in abundance. Yeah. In a sense, there's a common term, we live in this attention economy, and that is a function of the fact that technology has brought so many things to our possible attention.
Yes.
Right? Everything, right? I grew up in a world where Walmart in person had about 100,000 SKUs. And that was the world, right? You could go to the mall, but like Walmart had a lot of stuff, right? And now Walmart online has 500 million SKUs. And it's not alone. You've got Shane, you've got every other provider, and then you've got TikTok, and then you've got Netflix, and then you've got Robinhood.
So many marketplaces.
There's so many things in the world. And so you've got to make that decision in a small amount of time, project it over time, because it's not like you decide, I'm gonna get a new outfit, and then I'm gonna load it, and then I'm gonna buy it, and then I'm done. Right? Yeah. No, oftentimes it's you gotta like think about it, right? Yeah. And you gotta think about it. You're on your way to work, you gotta think about it for a few minutes, then you gotta switch your attention. Yeah. And then Thursday evening comes around, you're gonna go back and sort of, I'm gonna figure this out because I need to get it by Saturday. So it's a continuous process. So how do you understand that, surface the right concepts in terms of which item you might want, help you reflect where it came from. Maybe you care about sourcing because you care about sustainability or supply chain, provenance. Everybody's got a different perspective on their world, right? Yeah. That's the other thing, is we live in a world of material abundance and we live in a world of deep diversity, where we no longer think that our race and gender and age and simple things like that represent who we are. We're so much more specific than that. Yeah. So within that flow, at a given moment, in that moment, you decide that one dress you want to try. It's not the only thing. You want to try other things, right? But that moment, yes, now we have a problem, which is very technical, which is just, can I evaluate fit without having to order it and get it delivered? Yes, I'm excited about solving that technological problem, but Aampe is about solving the broader conversation and learning problem to help that person effectively navigate that, again, in a busy world.
How do you solve for that abundance versus diversity for your tool conflict?
So So abundance is just saying we have far more things in the world than ever before, right? But we have to have a way of grouping those things, right? So we sort of say, look, right now I'm interested in clothes. And then there is some functional distinction in terms of I'm interested in clothes that I'll wear generally speaking, right? But now, I've generally, urban grunge 90s versus, sleek cowboy or whatever. I'm sort of grouping down, and I'm grouping down based on diversity, like my single expression. Diversity is just like a lot of people who are unique. It's the flip. So how do you learn about that person and use that learning to help them narrow the space that they're searching in faster to get to the point of trial and error. And then the next time around, connect the dots so that we don't have a single one-off shopping experience where you buy one thing and then I come back a month later and I have a whole new profile, right? I want it to be linked, but I also want it to be linked in a way that's expressive of who you are. Right now, most shopping experiences are the representation of the item are simplistic, static, very shallow. So it'll just say black dress made of this material, price. Right? There's no, whereas if you go on TikTok and you search for fashion, you'll see like so many more expressive representations of like this style represents this kind of identity and, in this context, right? So the more the interface for the product, for the business, can reflect those specific concepts and help you use those concepts to navigate, what it's doing is then learning that those concepts are a good representation of you.
Where does it plug in the what we see on site or what we see in a store? Is it manifesting as like the more you like this like interface, the recommendations, personalized recommendations? Like, is your algorithm solving for that? Like, how does it manifest?
So it's a core infrastructure problem where the particular product interface itself today is a composite of many different systems. There's an inventory system and then a pricing system, and then there's a design system that's on the web, and then a design system that's mobile. If we try to just break that into component pieces, we can sort of say there's a mechanism by which a particular thing is rendered on a screen. And think of that almost like the US Postal Service, right? Where it's just you have to maintain an address and you have to have mail trucks and you have to have a central organizing and then you have to, but what goes in the mail, right? Like what letter do you send? What do you say, right? So if we just abstract it, we can say whatever delivery mechanism you have for the web and whatever delivery mechanism for your email and for a mobile app, what goes into that two-dimensional surface, that screen that you're looking at, is the heart of the problem. As long as what goes into representing what's on that screen right now the problem is that that decision is attached to that channel, is attached to that surface. So your email system is independent of your web system. And both of them are rule systems where you say, here's what should go in that email. A human does. A human says, here's what should go in the email. And another human design product team decides, here's what goes on the web. And because a human is embedded like a specific instruction, all the machine knows is, you told me this, you told me this, you told me this, rules, right? Like, these are the rules. I don't know anything, right? So what we're doing now is replacing those rule systems with this instantiation of a kind of agent, a kind of an entity that can make an iterative decision, observe the result, and then update its decision. And it can do that across contexts where it's context aware. It says, I know I'm on the web right now, and I know I'm sending an email. And so the cognitive functionality there is what's important. I think an analogy would just be like to autonomous driving.
Is it marketing agents, so to speak? Like, how we're talking about customer service agents and they're being around.
I wouldn't call it a marketing agent because the job to be done is a lot of
the
job to be done is a lot of like cognitive statistical experiment, right? There's a lot of other things that are happening as well as like marketing things of, I'm going to portray the item this way versus that way. It's a core agent that operates functionally across those levels. You can think of it this way, like a Waymo. If it removes the need for a human driver, right? You can actually imagine cars that look very different,
right?
Right? Like, why waste that space in the front of the vehicle
if you don't
need somebody sitting in that space? And yet, Waymo didn't start by redesigning the car. It just said, let's use the existing car. Let's create the space. And by the way, early on, we need somebody to potentially sit there in order to, if we need to fix it. So that was there. But as we grow confidence in it, we can start to reformat the vehicle. And in fact, in San Francisco, you can start to see early forms of vehicles that are changing the modality of the vehicle, right? So in a similar way, a lot of our software that humans use to manage these processes are still full of functions. In human evolution, we call it, actually the name is escaping, but there's a concept of where a particular organ is no longer needed. It's no longer.
I know what you're saying.
It's not vestigial, but there's a term. Yeah. But it just represents that the system has evolved beyond that, right? We don't need a wagon anymore on our road system. So it's no longer there. But at first the early forms of cars looked like wagons, and then we evolved away from them. And so a lot of the user interfaces are still assuming human levels of effort that are not needed, and we want to redirect and enable new levels. That's
what I was going to.
And that's the exciting.
What is the exciting thing about the new levels of effort? If you think of a wagon and where a human used to be and where it is now, I love that visual of the car and how, yes, somebody else is going to drive it for us, a machine, but where are we placed in the car? And that's kind of cool to think about, right?
So there's this really cool paper that came out a couple of years ago looking at reinforcement learning around mapping of route mapping.
Okay.
So Google Maps, Apple Maps, they've all gotten really good now at giving you a pretty good estimate of getting from one place to another in terms of time.
Right.
Now, start to think about it this way. There's that famous sort of saying, it's not the destination, it's the journey.
Yeah.
Right? In practical terms, it's almost always the destination, right? It's like take the shortest route, right? But when you start to think about it, there are actually meaningful differences in routes. Like, imagine walking, right? Do you want to walk along the lake and see the lake? Or do you want to walk through a cold, windy tunnel in Chicago, right? There's different contexts. There's the scenic route and there's the non-scenic route. There's the route that takes you through a neighborhood or takes you through, a resident, so many different formulations for
that. And the context changes. Like sometimes I want the scenic route.
That's right.
And then sometimes no,
I need to get to where I'm going, right? Like I want to stop by this thing or I'm going a straight shot. Yeah. Now, what we're starting to do in mapping is to start to be able to understand the mapping system itself, to understand the contextual differences between two routes, not just in terms of the time to destination, but in terms of the attributes of that route. Because then you can start to surface those in a very clean way to a person, allow them to give feedback on it. Right? And adjust it, right? So that's a new thing you had to do. Right now with the system, you just have to input my destination and select. Now you can start to say, well, no, as a human, it's still meaningful for me. I'm going along that journey. And if I need to be in think mode, I live in Sausalito, which is just north of San Francisco. I take the ferry. I love that commute because
I love that. That's a nice ferry.
It's such a nice, it just helps me, right? So I would pay extra. So that's the thing. You can start to kind of make that level of decision. I think in terms of fashion, right? If we can start to understand the intent behind people's decisions. Like I'm wearing this to feel good about myself versus I'm wearing this to, fit into a network or a community or to reflect what's trending and be ahead of the curve versus I don't want to be anywhere near the curve. I want to be just expressing who I am. Right? The more you can then learn that, there's a whole production cycle behind fashion.
Yeah. Oh my God. Yeah.
Huge production cycle. And it works on old forms of user research where it's like a bunch of people buy stuff. They buy it for all different reasons. We don't really know, but let's go out and survey them and find out and all that thing. And then that takes the cycle. You have to go back in and then plan your production and then decide next year's fashion. And it's super slow and it's super inefficient, et cetera. Big part of the problem is we just don't know enough about people. If our application is actually smart enough to interact with that person, to learn about them at that very granular level, think about how important that could be for changing our production cycles, where we say more of this kind of stuff, less of this kind of stuff, faster, right? It's kind of how everyone saw Netflix in the early days, that it started to produce content that was better because it was able to granularly analyze that content in terms of what was it about House of Cards that was so cool to people.
And how do we get more of it?
And how do you produce
more
more
of the
of
stuff
it,
that you
right?
love? Yeah,
Produce more of it. Produce more of the good stuff, less of the bad stuff, more of the niche stuff. So
and that's
you
how you get
shift,
to diversity.
and that's you affirm diversity, right, and support it. And so that becomes a strategic level of like feedback and decision making that is enabled because you're not in the tactical weed of like, let me set up this one A/B test across this one campaign.
You got to one thing that I wanted to ask, which is how do you get to it, right? You talked A/B testing, jobs to be done framework. You talked about a lot, customer journey mapping. How do you get to that intent that people like, the feeling that they want at each point of this journey, to like enhance your algorithm, enhance the software?
Let me ask you this. When you're meeting someone, how do you begin to understand who they are? Yeah.
So I'm known to disarm people a lot. So I get to really get them to be drop in and be vulnerable, and really like understand what makes them tick.
Yeah.
And then kind of get to business.
And give me how do you drop in on someone? What's like a tactic or a technique?
I use a lot of what's going on in my experience. So I'll use a podcast, refer to something that I read. And I found that interesting. Can you tell me more?
And can you do that to me real quick? Is there a podcast that you'd recommend I check out? I'm always looking to listen to something on flights.
For me, the recent one from Aspire with Emma Greed, she talks to the Amy Collet founder, which is a Black beauty founder.
Okay.
And she failed with her beauty company, and she talked about how she failed out. So the way I would ask you is like, she taught me a lot in this podcast about failing. Like, what were your moments of failure like along the way? So that's exactly, I would refer to that podcast and come to you and ask you those moments.
So that's a beautiful representation of a very human, very sophisticated process of taking something complex in the world like a podcast. This is probably a 30-minute or 45-minute podcast, and figuring out how to summarize it, right? You extracted, there's probably a lot about success that she got to, but you extracted the failure part, because that's probably the part that's a little less typical, that people are less comfortable with. You dropped that on me because you're kind of challenging me to like not just jump to success, but acknowledge failure, acknowledge the reality of it, right? You've done this really cool thing, and now what you're going to do is observe how I respond. Do I gel with it? Do I sync with it? Or do I tune out? I'm like confused by failure. Who wants to fail?
Who fails? I don't fail.
And then you're going to respond to that. You're going to adjust your model of me. Right? That's a beautiful thing. If we want an application, and dare I say an agent within that application, to be able to do that, if we want it to do that in a way that allows you to scale, right? Like when I was in India, there's 1 billion people. We can't, if we want to learn about all of those 1 billion people, I can't really drop you into every one of those conversations and have you tell them about the podcast. It's too hard, right?
It's not scalable.
But we need, but the detail of what you did, that gives us the clue to how it's done. You are sampling from a space, giving it to me. Now, let's say I don't respond. In a lot of contexts, that doesn't mean you can write me off.
Actually, that is a response.
It is right. Let's say I don't positively respond to that particular cue, right? There's a couple of different options here, right? Maybe you have a friend who's a better fit with me, and so you'll refer me to that friend. Or maybe you just realize, I don't have enough context on what you're talking about, but I'm going to try something else. Most of the time we do that. In even our deepest relationships, we continue to do that. Our closest friends, our long-term partners, we never really truly know them in a final way. They're just still discovering themselves. It's this process of discovery. The how you do it is by acting, and acting creates context from which you draw a conclusion. If you don't have the action, there's no context, there's no conclusion. Too many times in analytics and marketing and stuff, we assume that there's just like all this data, we can make a decision and make the best one. We don't realize that the interaction is the opportunity to learn. We are trying something. Now, yes, as you interact more over time, you'll begin to kind of guide the experience. But every once in a while, you'll still try something new because you haven't, said something in a particular way. So what we want is whatever we do cognitively to have that interaction, we want the application to be able to do something similar to that. We want to be able to project that job to be done into the machine and let the machine do that. It's a slick process. There's a lot of complexity to it, but that's the key thing. I'll give you one very tactical explanation for this.
Yes, please.
Just like humans respond to rewards, right? We respond to incentives, right? We need a cognitive apparatus to also respond to a reward. It needs to know the difference between good and bad in some sense, right? Everything bad can be good, and I'm all for that, right? But in a sense, we need some kind of reward system.
Yeah.
Classically, traditionally, machine learning systems have what are called very shallow or very sparse rewards. If my only reward is that you bought an item, then that is very shallow. Why? Because the vast majority of times we are not buying things.
Yeah.
We are shopping for things. We are discovering things.
Yes.
When you're talking to me, it's like it was like a romantic context, right? You are not deciding to marry the person and have children with them after one date, right? So how do you know it was a good date? You use a lot of intermediate mechanisms.
Yeah.
You observe that I'm responding positively and you're feeling positively. You know, like there's something internally, but you're also just responding to the cues I'm giving you. Right?
Yeah.
Those are important cues to get to the long-term reward of maybe having children if that's what you want. And so similarly in a technology, if our system only has a representation of a reward as a purchase event, you know that it is shallow. It can never do what we do.
Yeah.
So what are the positive rewards we can embed into the user experience and then smoothly connect them to conversion events? Right now, they're mostly completely disconnected. The way you do that in a product experience is things like adding something to a cart or adding to a wish list, right? That's about it. There's not much else going on. But actually, just opening something and looking at it a second time, following a particular trail forward of discovery around that item, all of those are actually rich signals that as a human we would watch and derive some conclusion and make up a story in our head about who that person is. We just need, again, the application to do that as well. Which is why it's a deep infrastructure problem. It's not just a marketing problem, because the entire data production process has to be self-aware that those are rewards that are linked to some ultimate reward, which, by the way, is not even an ultimate reward, because even as a business, a purchase, it's only one thing.
Yeah.
Nobody's excited. Nobody's satisfied with that. You want to buy one thing, but
unless you're like me and only buy 10 things, and then everyone is meant special.
Well, I would imagine when you get to those 10, you probably, every once in a while you want to slip and get that 11
oh my
thing
God,
in there,
of course.
right? So there's no end to it. It's the hedonic treadmill. But that's the key thing. So that's the how. The how is that detail manifested in software.
I've taken entirely too much time, but I could poke your brain forever. And I think you talked about education at the beginning with your software and planting the seed here. I think some of it is also getting people excited. The way that you've gotten me excited, right, is like you're humanized it and given me, hey, like what about, there's going to be like driverless cars. Yeah. But what does that open you up to do? Like that immediately puts a visual of the exciting things I can learn. How are you getting people excited about your tool? On a day-to-day?
Well, kind of the way I described, we're running lots of experiments.
Yes.
And I'm only one conduit of that experiment, in the sense that my way of representing is somehow needs to be somewhat authentic to who I am, the same way you communicate and drop in on someone in a way that's authentic to you. That's not going to be perfect for everybody. No. So we have to run lots of experiments in terms of where people get engaged. Yeah. My favorite form of education is helping people realize that the way we will improve technology is fundamentally by better understanding ourselves. Mm-hmm. You won't understand technology better if you don't actually understand ourselves better. Yeah. Ultimately, technology is just a means for communicating with a human. And in a sense, we have this massive opportunity to understand ourselves better. And technology, again, is a medium for me for that. And so the more marketers start to realize, holy, like what I'm involved in is a much bigger thing here, and I need to understand who my customers are and what that involves as a human, and then map that to, is my software helping me do that or not? And not just like, my software, make sure your click rates go up in order to kind of drive revenue, and like, that's not the form of education that I am effective at delivering.
I mean, in the era of self-help books and everything, people are genuinely trying to understand why their behaviors are the way they are, and to offer the solution to technology. And you said technology is an input, marketing is an input. There's so many ways to get at it, but it's so beautiful that Aampe is trying to solve for that. As I think through, you referred earlier that you're in San Francisco. This seems to be a late breaking move. Like you were in Singapore for quite some time.
That's right. Yeah, I was in Singapore and India for the last 12 years.
Yeah.
And I have a 3 and 6 year old. They were both born there. We loved it. It's just that I was so often in Singapore, San Francisco, and flying back. It's a 16-hour flight. It's a long haul. It's time away from family that reduces my energy that I can put into AMP. And we're growing very fast in Europe, so I spend a lot of time there as well. But ultimately, there is something special about San Francisco in terms of like the foundational elements of a lot of early adopters and community, et cetera. And so it was just a strategic choice that like it was a good time to just go ahead and be based there. I was already spending a ton of time there. My wife also works in early stage technology.
Okay.
It was a good move for her as well. And then the kids are loving Sausalito. So
and you get to take the ferry.
That's right.
I mean, that's always really nice.
That's right.
Sausalito is beautiful. Where can people find you in AMP?
Well, it's amp.com. And then also on LinkedIn. My email is just paul@amp.com.
Yes.
We're in X and all the other forms of social media as well.
I love your thought pieces on there. It's a great read for people to follow.
Okay.
Thank you so much, Paul.
Thank you.
Now make sure you subscribe to Evolve Voices, this leading and incredible project where our ambassadors are interviewing amazing professionals from all over the world so they can share their perspective and benefit you with their perspective, their knowledge, and you can understand what's happening in the different markets. Evolve Voices is a project part of the Evolve Commerce Club, the #1 and leading community where we connect international professionals in the world of commerce. We are now connecting professionals in more than 40 markets, and every week we invite an expert to share their perspective and their knowledge. So if you'd like to know more, you can always look at the comments. We have a link there so you can request your application and stay tuned for the next episode. Thanks for watching. All the best. Ciao.